Ready to move forward, and the US is our last player. Looks to me like China gets to go first. Remember, the economics happened at the end of the last turn, so we draw one of these and see what happens. Action card in China. That means, the US was an idiot. Did they even take a turn? They did, but they didn't put any agents anywhere, which means action cards are going to go out to red and blue only. Argentina produces extra income, as does the Philippines. Nobody's there. And this is turn 2, so we're not going to have the power vacuum. I gotta check to see if people have to discard cards. Is holding a handful of good defense. They decided to upgrade their positions. Economic control here, an alliance here. They're going for an economic sphere where they can get it. I have some stuff that works well with military still, even though I threw those 2 coups away. But I don't want to spend more money. I feel like the people who spent on military are kind of falling behind. I followed a similar policy. Upgrade to an alliance in Argentina, upgrade to economic control of Australia. It increases income, it builds up your engine. It's not time for military yet. Had things gotten serious here with the US winning something there, that would have changed the whole game. But they took a high risk option with that, and probably would have failed anyway because they would have just made an enemy of themselves to everyone else. There would have been a serious effort to degrade North America's position. There was nothing interesting on the European card. It's destabilized the Middle East, and that was successful. So all alliance factions and diplomats in the region get degraded, and that's a big deal because now the US has to pay for that military if they want to keep it there, or pay for it if they want to move it out of there, which is going to cause them to try to do something with it. On the other hand, getting rid of those factions, neither side was willing to or capable of defending against that little card. I haven't finished with the Soviets yet. Just wanted to come in with the news flash. Soviets spent big, and the US decided they're not going to have their military because they couldn't keep their hands off their cards. Soviets tried to get economic control in India. The US opposed it with a couple of cards. The only person who could oppose it, they were expensive cards, and they don't have enough money to do anything with their military, so it's going to get demobilized to get to keep this one. And what else? I don't know. The Soviets also increased economic control here. They don't have a lot of cash, so they're holding off on trying to further expand over here or something. Try to remember to put US agents into Soviet Union and China. That's drained of their money and taking the Soviets down from their action. More cards for everyone else. Then we put our agents out. This would have been interesting. Power vacuum in East Africa, but there's nobody there, so it didn't matter. That puts us to the end of the turn. The income is going to get calculated here. We should, I'll come back after it gets calculated. But I'm expecting things like Western Europe and China to start pulling ahead heavily. We might see a Soviet-North American alliance at this point because the fact that they engaged adversarially means that they're both kind of screwed. It's one of the things with the game is that the best thing to do is just feather your own nest and not engage with other people. Certainly not play the expensive attack cards or anything like that, which is sad. It's like this game works much more smoothly than Spies does. Spies puts you on a collision course where there are things you can grab in that game that are permanent victory points that you kind of win by grabbing them. So, or you get a big jump towards winning. Whereas here, your best move is really just to kind of establish your power base and not get into any kind of conflict, which is strange because, who got into the most conflict, North America and Soviet Union, and they became the most powerful. Not particularly because they got into conflicts, but the fantasy world that this represents just doesn't match the reality in any sense at any time. Economic standings chart, and in terms of position on the board, honestly, the people who spent the most, the Soviets are still doing okay, but the US is really doing crap in terms of everything. And the turn marker moves forward. Sadly, the game doesn't have any really early game ends because I'm already pretty damn bored. It's the thing that I forget about it. It seems neat. The system seems to work okay. Certainly Solitaire screws it up quite a bit, but there's just not enough to drive this thing. The U.S. is in kind of an annoying position where they got their military here. That's great if they were going against the Soviets with their military there, but they're not adjacent to any of these. I just had to look that sucker up, trying to decide if I want to keep some insurgency cards that aren't of any use otherwise. So, because we got a double action card, we got something interesting. Israel, if it had been important, would increase, and that's it. A couple of plays that happened here. The U.S. tried to drop a factory in here. Chinese played economic warfare. The U.S. couldn't oppose that. Well, they could, but they didn't want to. Then they went for the big military control marker, because then they can expropriate this. Well, let's make sure these cards, yeah, it's only when you initiate things that things get degraded in general. Chinese threw a double cross down. U.S. had the counter. Chinese had a counter. U.S. threw a mole down to prevent it, and we're able to go up. And I believe we're immediately able to remove this faction at that point. Which, this becomes probably not a good place for China to have their agent trying to remove a military control. It's going to be really expensive. We should just surrender that. The U.S. isn't doing well. We spent a fair amount of points on trying to prevent this U.S. military control. And for some reason trying to prevent the factory, which probably was foolish. Question is, why did the U.S. go first? I gotta let it stand, but they had the lowest amount of money. Mistakes happen. Once you start playing the cards, though, you can't really back it up. Like, if the U.S. had played a card and somebody had said, it's not your turn, dude, that would be fine. But, revealing several cards in an action, even in an opposed game, I think the answer would be, yeah, well, you jumped the gun, man. You take the disadvantage for going first. Idiot. And I think it's really just me playing solo because I knew what I was doing when I drew the power card, but then did not afterwards. Eastern Europe, who technically should have gone first, pads their forces. Another economic control, an alliance here to get to an economic control, a faction here to go up to an alliance or to get an extra factory or whatever, and trying to keep my points up high enough that I can react to whatever the hell happens as well. This is really how you win the game, is you build up your own stuff and you try to build up your defenses so that nobody can really touch you. But they might come slamming and your defensive hand may not be as good as you think against one particular attack or another. You only have a 7-card hand. It's hard to defend against everything because you have to have defense in depth if somebody's hitting you with a lot of cards. That puts us on the Chinese. It's feeling like they're falling behind. Have instituted 2 new factions in 3-point areas that are adjacent to their spheres, which is kind of good. And we do have our military control here. I don't know what good that does particularly. I think it allows us to do some insurgencies, no? Yeah. But against the U.S. But it does give us a little protection here. I wish the military control was there. We might end up putting the military in there. As well as we might want to put one down here. And that racks things up. It's time for the income and then more hand management bullshit because everybody's at 7 cards by now after the draws even after the initial fighting. Europe is increasing its policy of slow and steady growth. We're running into a little bit of trouble, though. We didn't want to try to do diplomacy, establish a faction in Venezuela with the U.S. there to interfere, so we swapped out, went to Turkey. That gives us some possibility of at least bringing some troops in and intervening in the Middle East. I feel like Russia could, as one of the weaker powers right now, it could swap that around. They also pulled a diplomat back just to have a little bit more flexibility. Just figured out a way to knock themselves out of the running. They were a little behind Western Europe. They built themselves a military, moved it in here. That's 10 points. They did other upgrades, factory in Indonesia, for example. They had gotten screwed in West Africa, so they feel like we got to kind of shake things up a little bit. Grabbed a faction in Israel to compete with the Turks and the Russians here, so that the Middle East is like not completely out of our reach, especially since we have a military now. We tried to do military control. The U.S. defeated us there. We tried to throw a coup. The U.S. defeated us there on several card plays. You can see the Chinese money is now drained. The U.S. has nothing left, so they're kind of a easy target. If somebody gets hit early in the turn, well, now everybody can go after them, which is kind of an interesting facet. But on the other hand, maybe China is also kind of a weaker power at this point. The card was an interesting one. It had the no income for the Horn of Africa and West Africa, which screws China, and that's why they undertook maybe the actions that they did. So now we go to the Ruskies and see what they do. By the way, we're almost done with the action deck, which means people who threw out their own moles might be kind of regretting that at this point. You almost always go through it once, I guess. Maybe twice, depending on the length of the game. But people are constantly discarding cards, trying to get what they want. Just lay low and padding their nest. In this case, they open up, put their diplomat into North America. That is going to allow them to coordinate and send money back and forth. As the game gets later, you're going to see more and more diplomats showing up. But in this case, hey, China just screwed us. Western Europe is clearly in the lead. Yeah. Well, Russia's doing pretty well too, actually, at this point. But since they had kind of already opened things up by letting them in, there's a little bit more friendliness there than there is elsewhere. However, the Russians are, like I said, threw a couple factories down, upgraded to economic control in the Congo, and they're increasing their power. They also tossed an agent into Australia. I don't know what good that does, to tell you the truth. They can move it there if they want to do something. It kind of, made Western Europe crap themselves for a moment. And now for the final, it's the U.S., who really doesn't have much to do, but let's take a look. We're going to have some action cards. Okay, we're going to have a vital rage increase if there was one in Venezuela, which there isn't. We're going to have a power vacuum in the Andean nations, but nobody's there, so it doesn't make a difference. So the only thing that matters is the card being handed out. If North America had enough points to do something, they don't. So that's the end of the line there. And now we go through the tedium of discarding cards again, but also grabbing the income. You can see as Western Europe and the Soviets are pulling strongly away. China, this was their turn to collapse, basically. In the U.S., well, the game kind of snowballs. Money that you had on one turn helps you make more money the next turn, and also keeps you from maybe looking weak, so that you're not being tested as much and your money's not being drained. Let's put us to turn 5. The game end is on turn 8. The hand management part, it's really bad solo. But even opposed, it's kind of annoying because you're constantly having to say, am I going to need this? Am I going to need that? I hate that kind of thinking. I really do. I hate trying to call things in that sort of way. I don't mind it so much in a pure card game. Like if I'm playing, I don't know, something like Express, the little choo-choos game with matching. I don't know. Have I visited that? I hope I have. That's a cool game. If I'm playing something like that, I don't mind that because that's what all my focus is on. But in this, and it's not like, oh, this is so unrealistic that you'd be discarding cards and seeing what new capabilities you can get. It's actually a pretty neat design. It's just obnoxious to me when I'm focusing on board position and income and all kind of stuff like that, and I have to worry. It doesn't help that the cards are tiny little things. Far better than the chits, though, and the spies, no question. After a fair amount of time off, yeah, the weekend. I'm actually sneaking in some on Sunday before I go shopping. I'm up stupidly early, not anymore, it's gotten a little later. But we start with Western Europe and let's see what they draw. Action card, turn 1 and 5. Okay, so we're gonna have a vital region SP increase in India, which is gonna turn this from a 4-point place to a 6-point place, which means it becomes even more valuable. Now, for the most part, because of the Soviet control being so powerful here, this is just a huge bonus for the Russians. And there's also going to be a power vacuum in the Congo, which doesn't mean a damn bit. We could spend 20, and we're going to have quite a bit towards that, in upgrading to political control. So we may get that almost for free, or at least for cheaper than we might otherwise. Let's see how much it's going to cost us. Let's see, we have economic control, that's 8. We have an alliance, that puts us to 15. So now it's 5 points to go up to political control without an action. 15. And we have a vital region marker. So it's only going to cost us 4 points to go up to political control. Probably worth doing just because of the victory points involved in political control. We're getting to the point where, what is it? The game's going to end on the next turn if nothing shakes it up. So it's definitely time to start padding your victory points. That big boost probably put the Soviets ahead of the Western Europeans by a little bit. We're not sure. But both sides want to start upgrading, not so much their income now as their victory points. Political control is worth 12, economics worth 10, military is worth 8. You can have economic and either political or military, but you can't have both political and military control of an area. So I think at this point people are going to be trying to pad their points, at least among the 2 leading players, and trying to get the advantages that they can at this time. And that's like, you know, increasing to political control, etc. And Europe tries to either catch up or assert dominance, whatever. Political controls in the areas where they were close. Economic control in Brazil. I could have gone for the alliance. That would be 2 steps to get my victory points for more victory points. But I get more cash from Brazil with the economic control. I'm ignoring the Middle East, just leaving an agent there. I might actually have wanted to put more than one. Here and here were very hard fought, but Western Europe's carefully held hand gave them more moles than their opponents had, and they still have their master spy. Now that's a really hard card to play because 10 victory points to play. It's tough as hell to decide that's worth using. I usually actually discard them because they're so expensive. But anyway, we increased to an alliance in Turkey, which is important because we'll be able to get to political control of the Big 12 victory points. The other option would be to lay a factory somewhere and go for economic control. But I don't have anywhere where I already have a faction established except here, which I might lose. I did try to go up to alliance here, because if I can get to political control, I could expropriate the factory, whatever. I'm not sure how much value that is. I don't know if there is an end game. I gotta look it up. If there's an end game economic stage, I think there might be. And I spent a good deal of my points, but I've got a pretty strong position now. That puts it over to the Soviets, whose card draw is lots of cards for people. That's a big deal for Western Europe especially. Indonesia and Israel are not going to get income. Well, that kind of hurts. The Chinese and no power vacuum this turn. The final income phase, and that's important because if somebody sneaks into the Mideast or something, or if there's these no incomes or whatever, but mainly if somebody sneaks into the Mideast, the penalties for grabbing something of someone else's take place at that point. So the last turn could be very, very bloody. All right, let's go on with the card, and then it looks like the Soviet turn. I realized I cheated with the Western Europeans. They couldn't go up to economic control in, say, Brazil. They have to get to an alliance first, and now their next turn, it's the choice between political and economic control. And that's still an interesting choice, because the political control is worth 12 points, this is worth 10, but an extra one of these adds 3, so I'm still better off getting the economic control, victory point-wise, in an area that's rich. I noticed this because I tried the same with the Soviets. Soviets did nothing aggressive. They actually have a defensive hand. They would like to interfere and try to mess with the Western Europeans, but they're not sure which. They weren't in a position to do it at this point in the game. And that means the Chinese card draw. And any of these card draws could, like, change the game turn end conditions immediately. We're going to have a power vacuum in East Africa, which means nothing. I'm sorry, a vital region SP increase, which means nothing, and a power vacuum in Egypt, which also means nothing. So just the card plays, our card draws are going to be important. In card draws, if you have someone in each of the opposing powers area, you get additional card draws throughout the turn. So spending your cards, although if you're giving up good cards like balls, there's a pain to that, but you generally can expect to get your hand back, by the time you get your next turn, maybe, depending on when in the sequence you're playing things. But, here, Soviet Union and China, that means that North America and Western Europe are both going to get 2 cards back this time. The other 2 are going to get 1. I did a couple of things. Successful economic warfare in India. Some mole versus mole play there. That was a hard call for the Soviets, whether or not they wanted to defend against China with that. But, because it's not that big a hit against them, and likewise for China, they played a mole as well. But it's a matter of, hey, I'm going to get more cards. I want to make these at least matter, at some point in the game. China took a very big hit with those economic hits this turn. They did grab military control in Korea, though, and the U.S. basically was unable to do anything about it. They expropriated the factory. They're not able to upgrade anything there, though, but they'll be getting some victory points if the U.S. can't do something about that. That military control is a real problem for the U.S., but the U.S. has plenty of problems already. And is essentially in third place, I think, guaranteed. I think it's really a Soviet Western Europe, assuming things end next turn. If there's enough time to play things out, maybe someone could regain some position, but this is a hard game to get back into place in. And now we'll finish off the turn with the U.S., and let's see what their magic card looks like. Action card in the U.S., vital region SP increase in Egypt, not this turn. Okay. So yeah, just a card draw that the U.S. doesn't get to play in. For any amount of money the U.S. had, there was really nothing they could do about Korea in particular. They threw a diplomat into the Middle East, some kind of... They don't have the points to use it, though, because they upgraded their alliance to an alliance here. Western Europe said, yeah, go ahead, we don't care. Had Western Europe wanted to, they could have played upgrading to an alliance there, getting themselves in a position to get political control so they could expropriate. Probably would have been a worthwhile thing to do, just to pick on the poor U.S. some more, because they've become sort of a source of points rather than anything else at this point. Although their big military control here has some effect. They couldn't even move their military, though, say out to sea or something for 5 points. They didn't have enough points to do that and do an action. They're just so hosed. They're basically a third world power now in the game. call it second world because they have no ability. They have an ability to influence the world stage, but they have no ability to actually pursue their own goals to any significant amount. The best they can do is kind of skew someone else. So, point-wise, let's take a look at what happens here. Penalty, yeah. So the U.S. is going to have to pay 5 points to the Chinese for controlling this. And so China gets an extra 5 points they wouldn't get otherwise, in addition to their factory gains, etc. And the U.S. is just driven further into a hole. And that's why the Middle East is so important, because everybody has to pay you 5 in that case. This is where our points are before the exchange. U.S. has exactly 5. I don't know what happens if they didn't have it. I guess they pay what they have, which could cause China more problem. Could cause China to get less income if the U.S. had been degraded enough. They're in such bad shape. They're walking into the final turn of the game with no points. It doesn't get much worse than that. Yeah, what seems to be likely to be the last turn of the game. Let's start off with the Soviets. Their draw. And the card draws SP increase in Turkey. Doesn't matter, nobody's got anything there. Power vacuum in Argentina. Okay, that's sort of something of a potential bonus for Western Europe. The disadvantage to it is the U.S. can bid in it. They're not going to want to. We'll see the quick points. An agent is worth 1, so the U.S. has 1 point. Here, it's political, economic control, and a marker. That's 12, 21. The U.S. can't beat them. There's nothing really that the Western Allies or Western Europe gets out of being there. So, with the amount of points they have, they would be able to get a free political control, but they have it already. So we'll go on to the Soviet turn. The question for the Soviets was whether or not they wanted to build a military and try to do something in Yugoslavia. I don't think their cards really helped them terribly for this. They drew for a coup. I don't remember. They may have thrown away the instability or whatever they wanted, insurgency. It's a really expensive move to try to hit Western Europe. Now, Western Europe is sitting on 20 points there, though, and they're my main opposition. So it would have been a worthwhile move, which could have brought China back into the game. Instead, we think we're in the lead, and we just solidified our position, which puts us indeed to Western Europe. Some actions. Instant income, Afghanistan and Yugoslavia. Well, that's a big bonus for us. The Soviets get some points. They get 8 points off this. But they've already taken their turn, so that's just victory points. But we get, I don't know how much difference it makes, our own 8 points, which is also probably just victory points, because unless we got drained of all our points, we're not going to have a problem there. And no power vacuum, it's not late enough in the game. It found itself already out of cards of any use, really. There's not a whole hell of a lot I can do right now. Not just cards of any use. So both the Soviets and Western Europe have been hoarding defensive cards because they've been doing well. And on top of that, the Western Europeans are really out of counters. They have no more alliance counters. Brazil, they would have liked to have gotten political control there. They went for economic instead because they could put a political control in Turkey. But that's the last of their 2-3 pip counters, and you're limited by counter mix in this game. So they did what they could. That puts us on, and you can see they're below the points that Russia has. That puts us on the Chinese, who probably can't change anything here. Everybody except the Soviets gets a card. Indonesia and Israel will get money. That's $3 for Indonesia. Always nice. And just missed the power vacuum in Yugoslavia, which wouldn't have meant anything because people kind of, accept each other's spheres of influence in this game, to tell you the truth. Engagement early on is a quick way for the two people who are involved to lose the game. Which, even late in the game, China and the U.S., China fell back a little further due to their engagement and some bad luck. The U.S., well, it was engagement that knocked them out of the game right in the beginning. Very historical. The U.S. definitely played some direct engagement roles, as did the Soviets. Of course, they were also both significantly more powerful than China or Western Europe during the historical Cold War period. And if we go to some post-Cold War period, well, I don't know. I think if you took that kind of situation, you'd end up with China winning because they were the only ones who didn't really engage, say, in the 1980s era. And maybe they won. I don't know. I don't feel like they exerted the kind of political, military, or economic control over anything that would give them the kind of victory points they won. Maybe they were just a terrible player who spent all their points on I don't know what, building islands. I don't. Yeah. So anyway, let's resolve whoever the hell China's turn. Now they want to shake things up, but here's the problem: they got two people who are beating them. They've got to knock both of them down. The U.S. is worth nothing this game at this point. So it's really just a race between these two, which one did a better job of padding their income. I think board presence, I think the Western Europeans have a little bit better, but it's hard to tell because, yeah, they're not getting an economic control with that marker. So this marker cancels out this marker. And I think both sides have all the political control they can throw out. The Soviets have a military control, though. Oh, they didn't challenge China here by building this economic control. They should have done that. That was a mistake. That probably brings these about tied to about this many points, which might be fine. It's making their move. They're going to attempt to destabilize the Congo. Okay. They play destabilization, pay the points. Russia had cards that would have prevented destabilization, but they would cost them points, and they know this is a tight game, so they play their mole. Hey, that's great, except they only have one, and China has a mole too, which means this goes down. Alliance, faction, diplomat. And that just cost them 12 victory points because they were a little cheap, right? Well, China's going to try the same thing now over here against Australia. I would have liked to have done an economic warfare here, but I can't do too many things in a turn. So I'm going to move this over here. Well, actually, I don't have another destabilization. All I have is economic warfare. So I'll do one of them against this for 2. And we'll see how they feel. Obviously, that's not worth a Master Spy. A Master Spy is 10 victory points. However, see what I have. I do not have anything that prevents economic warfare, which means China has degraded 8 of my victory points there. And they're going to do the same thing over here. I don't know, I did Brazil or Australia first. Over in Australia, and same effect. I just don't have the cards that can stop it, except the Master Spy, which isn't worth it. Now, there isn't a lot else I can do that's of any value at all. No, I could assassinate something, but that's just spending a point for no good. Which means I'll spend the rest of my points on trying to upgrade my position, which should be pretty easy. No one else is in the places in my position. I've got quite a few places I can get points. In taking all those and getting me kind of to the same victory point status that Russia and Western Europe are in, yeah, but I dropped my victory points down to here now. Of course, I've done some damage to both of them, but I don't think that I've caught up in any sense of the word. And now we draw the last card of the game, unless it's a game end card, which it's not. Now a power vacuum in Turkey. This is no real problem. it would be an opportunity to upgrade to political control, but I've already done that, and nothing goes away if you fail, right? Let me make sure. Now, the only way you lose is if someone else can bid in there. That's the only way you lose. Some action cards are going to get handed out. It's not going to make a damn bit of difference. Central America and oh, wait. Okay, so the U.S. gets 4 points. They could actually do something, so these cards might matter. And the power vacuum in Turkey we're going to ignore. I'm going to see what the U.S. can do with its 4 points. It's not a lot. It's not going to be able to do a military intervention. Yeah, I mean, what we'd like to do is grab the Middle East. We can't do that in one turn, because you got to lay the faction down in order to put your military there, or in order to put a factory there, or in order to go up from a faction. So I don't see much they can do except improve what they already have. It's possible they could get rid of that, but it would be really, really hard. They would have to be able, I think, to put a military here, because destabilizing doesn't get rid of military control. You'd need an insurgency for that, and that requires military in an adjacent region, which would be the ocean in this case. So we're probably just about at the point where we count up the points. I don't think anybody's going to prevent the U.S. from doing their actions, so I'm actually not going to even worry about the cards. The U.S. doesn't have enough points to get a victory point anywhere. So now we do just count up the points. I'm just going to say the U.S. passes. They got nothing better to do. For that, well, let's see what China has first. 12, 20. Oh, we got to collect money first. Let's collect our income. Would that be worth doing? Yeah, so no, I can't get economic control. I could get a factory here, which would cost me 3 to build. 1, 2, 3. And it'll get me 4 victory points because of production. And that's really all I can do. I can gain 1 victory point off that. All right. And I'll grab the income, come back, and do the final scoring. This is where the income got them. U.S. However, I forgot about the 5 points that the U.S. has to give up to China, which is a big deal. I mean, if this were at all close, China might be in the running, but they're not. So let's look at the U.S. points first. They get nothing here. They get 10 for military control, and I think that's all they get. So they're up to 14. Woo! Well, they're not in it. For China, 20, 32, didn't get my factory there, 52, 62, 70, 80, 90 points. So they're at 146. So we'll put them on the 26, and we'll just throw the U.S. out of there so that they don't confuse things. Western Europe is at 20. Nothing. 40. 52. So 76. Sounds like 126. Well, that's better than I thought China was going to do. The extra points off the U.S. Guess they were bigger than I thought, or else I miscounted or something. It's quite possible to miscounted. Here, that's 12. No, I'm sorry, 8, 20, 32, 52, 62, 146. So the Soviets got away pretty easily, just I guess where the Chinese managed to hit the Western Europeans harder than they hit the Soviets. They only took one counter away from the Soviets. They took two away from the Western Europe. And here's the thing, they took away factories. Now, economic control is kind of interesting because sometimes economic control is worth a hell of a lot. It's only worth 8 points, right? Yeah, except it's worth another 3 in production. So it's worth 11 points, somewhere between military and political control, unless there's a no income marker in the space. And with the 4-point spaces, even more so. So, yeah, the Chinese definitely helped the Soviets win the game, but they also dragged the Western Europe down to their exact location. So, they tied for second instead of coming in third, which you have to say is not an unreasonable choice to make in the game. I played real sloppy, there's no question. It's supposed to be kind of a fast-paced game, so you really shouldn't be calculating out the victory points and everything and trying to balance out and figure out who's really in the lead. But the problem is sometimes you're able to kind of sandbag where you are in the game. And I don't know, but it would really suck if everybody was calculating out all the victory points because they aren't absolutely obvious. And that's kind of the thing. But again, it's this fast-paced card playing, counteraction game. And to have all this information open but not easily readable, which is to say you do have to do this counting and everything if you want to know who's actually doing well, it kind of defeats the whole flavor of it. I feel like with all the hidden information in Spies, it does a better job of that. Obviously, conflict, bad. Never enter into any kind of conflict in this game. Never do proxy wars. Never do anything. Try your best to keep a low profile and build up your shit. And it's totally a game about turtling. You see, the people when they engage. Now, Russia did kind of engage, not on their own terms, but they kind of got in an engagement with the U.S. at one point, I think. Or at least the threat of one. I don't know if it actually developed, and then they kind of made an alliance with the U.S., and the U.S. spent its effort taking, or getting taken down by China or something. I don't know. Every now and then conflict's worthwhile. This one was worthwhile. You had a weak U.S. that couldn't defend itself. You grabbed something from it and got something key to it that was giving you additional income as well as, a better location. 4-point spaces are your best spaces on the board, except for any 6-point spaces that happen to show up, which sure didn't hurt the Soviets at all to have one of their spaces end up bonused. I'm not sure why the Soviets didn't increase their economic. Yeah. That would have helped them. It's a matter of, it's really easy to lose track of things and make mistakes in this. They certainly should have built that up. And there's a few things that should have happened. I mean, here they had to get the political control. Here I think they had to go up to political control as well. But in some cases, their economic power, if they had played a little differently, maybe they could have been ahead by even more. I don't know. All right, we're going to pack this one up, and I guess I'll come back with the review, although I've said most of what I'm going to say about it. As always, it's just some people don't want to listen to the whole playthrough, and for me, I'm kind of like, well, I understand not wanting to watch the playthrough, and I'm not sure I understand wanting to watch the review if you don't watch the playthrough, and I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure I understand much of anything, so whatever, I'm just happy to have people willing to enjoy what I'm doing for whatever reason. But yeah, even if it's just to hear my noises in my mouth, I don't know. But yeah. All right. We'll just let this go, and we'll get back. We'll put another video in a little bit.